The dust of the Iraqi desert, fine as powdered brick, settles on everything. It coats the modern tools of the archaeologist and the ancient stones they seek in a uniform, pale blanket. In the early 20th century, amidst the ruins of Nippur, Larsa, and Kish, men like Hermann Hilprecht and Thorkild Jacobsen were unearthing objects that defied all logical understanding of history. They weren't golden treasures or towering ziggurats, but something far more perplexing: clay tablets, covered in the precise wedge-shaped marks of cuneiform. When these scholars painstakingly translated the texts, they found a king list. But this was no ordinary record of mortal rulers. It began with a statement that would send a shiver down the spine of any historian. After the kingship descended from heaven, the kingship was in Eridu. What followed was a chronology so staggering, so utterly alien to our understanding of time and human rule, that it has fueled debate and wonder for over a century. This is the Sumerian King List, and it claims that before the kings we know, before the dynasties of Ur and Uruk, the earth was ruled by gods, not for centuries, not for millennia, but for a grand total of 241 years. This is the story of that list, not as a literal truth, but as a window into the mind of the first civilization, a profound mystery etched in clay, and a testament to a time when the boundary between heaven and earth was as thin as a whisper. Our story begins not in a museum, but in the fertile, sun-baked crescent of Mesopotamia, the land between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Around 4500 BCE, here, the Sumerians began to build the world's first cities. They invented writing, the wheel, the plow, and codified law. They gazed at the heavens and mapped the stars, creating the first systems of mathematics and astronomy. They were a people intensely aware of their place in a cosmos populated by powerful, capricious deities. The gods were not distant abstractions. They were as real as the river flood, the summer drought, and the date harvest. Anu ruled the sky, Enlil the air, and Enki the sweet waters of the abyss. And these gods, the Sumerians believed, had once lived among them. The King List itself, discovered in various fragments that corroborate each other, is a dry, bureaucratic document in tone, which makes its contents all the more shocking. It is a sequential register of cities that held kingship, a concept known as the Me in Sumerian, a divine decree of power and order. The list is divided into two distinct, jarringly different sections. The first section, the one that deals with the antediluvian world, the world before the Great Flood, is where the numbers become astronomical. It begins in Eridu, the city of the water god Enki. In Eridu, the list states, Alulim became king. He ruled for 28,800 years. Alalgar ruled for 36,000 years. Two kings, they ruled for 64,800 years. The list continues, moving the kingship from city to city. Enmenluana in Bad Tabira ruled for 43,200 years. Enmegalana ruled for 28,800 years. The shepherd Dumuzi, a god himself, ruled for 36,000 years. Then in Sipar, Enmedarana ruled for 21,000 years. And finally, in Shurupak, Ubaratutu reigned for 18,600 years before the Great Deluge swept over the land. The numbers are not random. Scholars like Joran Freiberg have noted their mathematical elegance. They are all multiples of 3,600. To the Sumerians, 3,600 was the Sar, a fundamental sacred number. It represented a complete perfect cycle, the number of years in the Great Year, a concept related to the slow precession of the equinoxes. These were not meant to be literal solar year lifespans. They were symbolic chronologies, expressing the immense cyclical nature of divine time, a scale utterly incomprehensible to mortal beings. The reigns were long because the rulers were not men. They were gods, or perhaps demigods, beings who operated on a temporal plane far beyond our own. Imagine the scene in a dusty scriptorium in Ur. A scribe hunched over a wet clay tablet, his stylus carefully pressing the signs. He is not inventing fiction. He is copying a sacred tradition, a history passed down for generations. To him, these numbers were a testament to the primordial order, a time when the gods walked the earth and established the very principles of civilization, kingship, agriculture, law, before gifting them to humanity. The immense duration served a crucial political and theological purpose. They anchored the current, mortal king's authority in an unbroken chain of legitimacy that stretched all the way back to the heavens themselves. It was a way of saying, the power I wield was not conceived by man. It is a divine heirloom, as ancient as the world. But then, the list tells us, this golden age of god-kings came to a cataclysmic end. The gods, displeased with the noise and clamor of humanity, decided to send a flood to wipe the slate clean. This is a story echoed later in the Epic of Gilgamesh and the biblical account of Noah. In the Sumerian version, the wise god Enki, contravening the decree of the Council of Gods, warns the pious king Ziusudra, the counterpart to Noah, of the coming deluge. He instructs him to build a great boat and save the seeds of all life. The flood rages for 7 days and 7 nights, wiping away the old world and its impossibly ancient rulers. And when the waters recede, a new era begins. The King List marks this as the most profound turning point in human history. After the flood had swept over, and the kingship had descended from heaven, the kingship was in Kish. And here, the numbers change dramatically. The reigns become shorter, though still fantastical by our standards. The first post-Diluvian king of Kish, Jushur, rules for 1,200 years. His successors rule for 900, 1,000, and 700 years. Gradually, over the course of several dynasties, the reigns whittle down from centuries to decades, finally settling into the plausible lifespans of historical kings we can corroborate with other archaeological evidence. This dramatic shift is the heart of the mystery. The King List is presenting a coherent, albeit mythical, theory of human history, a descent from the divine. The closer humanity is to its point of origin, the closer it is to the gods, and the longer its rulers live. As generations pass, as the memory of the gods fades and humanity becomes more firmly entrenched in its own mortal realm, the life force diminishes, and reigns grow shorter. It is a story of a falling away from grace, a loss of primordial knowledge and vitality. What were these gods? The Sumerian texts describe the Anunnaki, the great gods who decreed the fates. Were they purely mythological constructs, personifications of natural forces? Or could the King List be a distorted cultural memory of something else entirely? Some researchers, like the controversial Zecharia Sitchin, have proposed literal interpretations involving ancient astronauts, suggesting the long reigns were the time alien visitors spent on Earth. While this view is overwhelmingly rejected by mainstream academia due to severe linguistic and historical inaccuracies in his translations, it highlights the profound strangeness of the document. The King List refuses to be easily categorized. It is not pure history, yet it contains historical truths. It is not pure myth, yet its scale is mythic. The power of the Sumerian King List lies in this very ambiguity. It forces us to confront the different ways civilizations perceive time and their own origins. For the Sumerians, the past was not a linear progression from primitive to advanced, but a golden age of superior beings, followed by a decline. The list is a bridge, a desperate attempt to connect the flawed, human present with a perfect, divine past. It is a lament for a lost world, a world where gods ruled the earth for 200 years, and whose echo, however faint, still resonated in the office of every Sumerian king who followed. The transition is stark. After the thunderous, world-shattering event of the Great Flood, the Sumerian King List resumes with a new, quieter, but equally profound statement. After the flood had swept over and the kingship had descended from heaven, the kingship was in Kish. The air has changed. The primordial mists have cleared. The age of the gods ruling directly is over. We have now entered the age of heroes, the time of demigods and mighty men, a bridge between the divine and the fully human. This second part of the list is where legend begins to bleed, slowly and inexorably, into verifiable history, and the mysteries only deepen. The city of Kish, north of the traditional Sumerian heartland, became the seat of the first post-Diluvian dynasty. But the shadow of the antediluvian world was long. The first king of Kish, Jushur, still ruled for 1,200 years. His successor, Kulisina-Bel, ruled for 960. These are not the 36,000-year reigns of the gods, but they are still far beyond mortal limits. The list continues through 23 kings of Kish, their reign steadily decreasing, 900, 1,000, 700, 500, 400 years. It's as if the divine energy, diluted by the flood and the mixing with humanity, is slowly leaking out of the world. The numbers are still symbolic, but the symbolism is changing. It no longer represents the perfect cycles of the cosmos, but rather the fading glory of a heroic age. Then, a dramatic and pivotal entry shakes the foundation of Kish's power. The kingship is transferred to Uruk, a city that would become synonymous with one of the most famous figures in all of ancient literature, Gilgamesh. The list records, Meski-Agashur, the son of the god Utu, entered the sea and ascended the mountains. This is a tantalizing fragment, suggesting a king of such divine power he could traverse the boundaries of the world. His son Enmerkar is credited with building the city of Uruk and challenging the distant kingdom of Arata, a tale told in a magnificent epic where he invents writing on a clay tablet to send a message too long for his messenger to remember. But it is the figure of Gilgamesh, the fifth king of Uruk, who truly embodies this transitional era. The king list states matter-of-factly, Gilgamesh, whose father was a ghost, the lord of Kulaba, ruled for 126 years. The parenthetical question mark is that of the modern translator, baffled by the term Lilu, often interpreted as a phantom or spirit. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, he is described as 2/3 god and 1/3 human, a tyrannical, restless king whose grief over the death of his wild friend Enkidu sends him on a quest for immortality. His 126-year reign in the list fits perfectly with his mythological status, not a full god, but far more than a man. This is where the king list ceases to be mere myth and becomes a palimpsest of history. For a long time, Gilgamesh was considered a purely legendary figure, but archaeology has confirmed the existence of the walls of Uruk, which the epic attributes to him. A historical King Gilgamesh likely did rule Uruk around 2600 BCE. The list has taken a real historical personage and placed him within a narrative of descending divinity. His quest for eternal life, which ends in tragic failure, is the perfect metaphor for this post-Diluvian age. Humanity, born of the gods, is now irrevocably mortal, and the knowledge of this separation is its greatest burden. The list continues its march through the dynasties of Ur, Lagash, and Isin, the reigns now shrinking to decades, then to years that are historically plausible. We meet figures like Sargon of Akkad, the cupbearer who founded the first great empire, and his daughter Enheduanna, the world's first named author. These are people we know existed, whose inscriptions and monuments have been found. The king list has guided us, step by step, from the incomprehensible realm of the gods, through the heroic age of demigods, and finally into the dawn of recorded history. But the mysteries are not solved. They simply change form. One of the most perplexing aspects of the later parts of the list is its claim of dynasties ruling consecutively, when archaeology shows they were often contemporary, ruling different city-states at the same time. Why would the scribes present a linear sequence when the reality was a messy, competitive struggle for power? The answer is likely ideological. The concept of kingship, or Nam-Lugal, was singular. The Sumerians believed that there could only be one true holder of the eme of kingship at any given time. To admit that multiple kings ruled simultaneously would be to undermine the very divine, singular authority the list was created to uphold. It was a political document, crafted to legitimize the current ruling dynasty by placing it at the apex of a long, unbroken, and exclusive line of succession from heaven. The final haunting mystery of the Sumerian King List is its purpose. Why did the Sumerians feel the need to create such a detailed, precise, and yet fundamentally mythical chronology? Imagine the power it held. In the court of Shulgi of Ur, or Lipit Ishtar of Isin, a scribe could unroll the tablet and trace the king's authority back through the mists of time, past the great Gilgamesh, past the flood that wiped the world clean, all the way to Alulim, the first king, to whom kingship was given by the gods themselves. It was a potent tool of propaganda, a divine mandate written in clay. Furthermore, it served as a cosmological anchor. In a world of unpredictable floods, invasions, and droughts, the King List provided order. It presented history not as a random day. The fragments of the Sumerian King List reside in museums in Istanbul, Oxford, and Berlin. They are silent, cracked, and fragile, yet they continue to speak across 4,000 years. They do not give us easy answers about our past. They do not prove that aliens walked the earth or that kings lived for millennia. The list is a monument to human imagination, a bridge between myth and history. It reminds us that every civilization tells a story about its origins, and in that story, we can find its deepest fears, its highest aspirations, and its understanding of the universe.